everyone. My name is Jesse Chason with Lisa Blanchard as the host of Airing Addiction.
I share often my journey started on this campus. Got sober as a client here, just like you.
I really do see phenomenal change.
Always hope. I've seen situations that on the surface look impossible, become possible.
Doing this podcast is to share those recovery stories, be honest about what the challenges are and have some real conversations, but kind of share that out on the airwaves.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of Airing Addiction. So we actually will hopefully get 2 episodes in March because we didn't get one in February if you're listening live, but February is a super short month and it's cold and sad, and now we're in March and things are starting to look a little bit better, at least here in New England. So I have a pretty bright outlook. I'm ready for spring and ready for some great conversations. So I'm really excited about our guest today. Jesse, do you want to go ahead and introduce our guest?
Sure. Thanks, Lisa. I love the bright outlook, and I too look forward to sunshine and warmth and all that good stuff, all that new life that spring means. So today we have the privilege of speaking with Brittany. Brittany is a woman in recovery. Brittany and I's paths crossed not too long ago in recovery, and as soon as I heard her story, I just thought immediately, wow, she would be a great guest on here. We're really in for a treat today to hear Brittany's story. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Brittany.
Thank you so much for having me. My name is Brittany and I'm an alcoholic in recovery. My sobriety date is July 15th of 2020. Part of my story happens to be spectrum, but I'm going to backtrack a little bit and start at the beginning. I come from a dysfunctional family. There was a lot of abuse and trauma, sexual, physical, mental. There was starvation. I ended up getting taken from my mother at 10 years old because my mother too struggled, excuse me. She's been sober for over 20 years now. I have 2 younger siblings that I raised and then a recovery sibling because my mother also is in recovery. And I don't have that much of a relationship with her because I'm significantly older than her. But she is 20 years old and she's thriving, and so is my mother. So I went into foster care at 10 years old. Before that, my mother had amazing parents who owned a strawberry farm, who gave me the first 5 years of my life, set like a wonderful foundation for the person that I was going to become. They instilled a lot of values in me. And for that, I will forever be grateful. They're no longer here present on earth, but I feel their energy always. When I was 10 years old, my siblings and I had went through a drug bust, and we had woken up to SWAT in our home. And for a 10-year-old, that is traumatizing. And we were separated and taken into DCF custody. And I was heartbroken. That was my first experience of heartbreak because I was all alone and I was afraid. We had been taken by my maternal aunt out of foster care, and we went to live with her. And I had thought that, oh, wow, I get reunited with my siblings. This is going to be amazing. No more trauma, no more abuse. I get to be with them. And even though I missed my mom and I didn't understand that she had a drug problem and she was super sick, I was thankful to be with my siblings again. Fast forward a little bit, it wasn't the happy ending I thought it was going to be. My aunt suffered from mental illness that was never diagnosed, but being in the medical field today, I realized that she too was very, very sick. My story became sort of a Cinderella story. I had to manage the home. I had to do the grocery shopping. And I mind you, I was very, very young, 11 years old. So I did the grocery shopping. I walked to a store called Winco because I'm from the Pacific Northwest, Portland, Oregon, actually. I would walk daily and get groceries. I'd come home. I would clean. I would cook for an entire family. I was essentially a slave as a child. I endured a lot of mental abuse there. A voice that I hear in my head, even to this day, is that I will never be good enough and I'm never going to amount to anything, because that's what I was told. That's what I was told at a young age. My aunt, who was sick, would tell me that I was going to be a prostitute like my mother, and I was going to go nowhere in life. And I was useless. I was useless, and I was never going to be good enough. So kickstart my drinking career. At 12 years old, I had my first drink. It was a Steel Reserve 211, and I was hanging out with my cousins, who I was forced to call my brothers. And I was also forced to call my aunt mom, which was very confusing for an 11-year-old. And so my cousins, they had a bunch of friends. They were older than me. And I had my first drink, and I got the spins. But after I ingested that first drink, I felt like a moment where I could breathe, because my fear was gone. I had no fear. I was like, yes, this is superpowers. I have no fear. I have no anxiety. I'm calm. But then I got sick, and I was like, oh, maybe I'll stay away from that because it made me so sick with the spins. Fast forward, I'm in high school. I had watched my uncle pass away before me in front of my eyes. And I knew he was having a cardiac event for 3 days. And I was screaming, like literally screaming for help from everybody, and nobody would listen to me, and nobody would help him. And eventually he flatlined in front of me, and he couldn't be resuscitated. He died. And that was the most painful experience of my life, because I didn't have a dad. I didn't have anyone that I considered safe as a male figure in my life, because the one person who my mother had married, which was my stepdad, sexually abused me every single night. So I didn't realize that there was a safe man in my life until the one that I had, which was my Uncle Tyndall, died in front of me. He was gone. He was the only man who was in my life consistently, from the day that I was born to the day that he died, which was January 24th of 2005. That day was one of the worst days of my life. I struggle with that still to this day. But it was an experience that I had to go through. And for all of the experiences that I've been through, I'm grateful, because it's made me who I am today. My aunt at the time, now that my uncle who had lived with us was gone, he was my only form of protection, I guess. And when he died, she threw me out. She threw me away. She had packed up all my belongings and dropped them off, quite literally, in front of my high school. I was a freshman, in front of the entire school, other students. I was mortified. I was scared, and I didn't know what to do. I had nowhere to go. I'm 14 years old. I had nowhere to go. So being 14 years old and being a young woman who's insecure, who has no male role models, who has no values or self-worth at the time, had no female friends. I only had male friends. DCF obviously is called to the school. They asked if I had a girlfriend I could stay, and I didn't have a girlfriend that I could stay with. I only had guy friends. And so I asked a girl that I had known if I could stay with her, but we weren't friends. It was so uncomfortable and so awkward, and I felt so uneasy. But then a foster care home who took teenage girls opened up, and they took me in, and my whole life changed when they took me in. I spent a few years with them, and they changed my life. They showed me what it was to be a kid and to have parents that cared, because I had never experienced that until I was 14. So to have parents that cared and instilled rules, would supply you with basic needs like clothing and feminine hygiene products, things that I never had access to, even while living with my aunt, was a tremendous gift. But it was overwhelming too, because I had never had structure. So to not have any structure and then go into a home where there is structure, I naturally rebelled. And I fell in love with a older boy who was a double senior, like he was a repeat senior. So he was older than me. I was going into my sophomore year, and I fell head over heels for this boy. And come to find out he was a drug dealer, which I didn't know at the time when I fell for him. And so this kick-started my partying career, where I was a weekend warrior. I would drink every single weekend, and I did cocaine with him as well. It took me a really long time to try cocaine because I was so afraid. I was fearful of what it was going to do. But then when I did take it, I focused more on alcohol because alcohol is what took me down. Alcohol took me to my knees, and I didn't realize it at the time that was where my life was heading. So I'm with this boy. I end up dropping out of high school. I went from a straight A student to failing every single class, skipping school all the time, hanging out with this guy, running away, driving around in his car, drinking alcohol. I didn't ever like weed, but he would be smoking blunts while he was driving. It's just like all the things as a parent today, like that I fear my child. I fear for him, because there's no way in hell I would want to ever let him do something like that. So I'm doing what I want, basically, not listening to the parents that I had. And I'm just drinking on the weekends, not going to school, not caring, drop out. It gets violent with this boyfriend. There's domestic violence in there. I move in with him because I ran away. I didn't want to live at my home anymore because I was so in love, and this was going to be my forever person, this guy. And even though there was domestic violence and abuse on both ends with us, I didn't realize that was wrong because I had seen that growing up. So I stayed for too long. Eventually, I got a moment of clarity. This was my first experience with a higher power. I was not really religious. I always had a resentment against what people had called God, because I was like, why is this God so punishing? Why is this higher power letting all these horrible things happen to me and my siblings? And yet there's people walking around who have done way worse things, and they weren't children, and they get to just be happy. That's not fair. So I had a resentment against higher power, but for whatever reason, I hit my knees in the bathroom that day, and I asked God to help me with this addiction, because I realized I was getting hooked on coke and I was drinking all the time. And something happened because I threw away the cocaine. I walked away from that relationship and I never looked back. One thing I didn't realize was an issue was that I immediately got into another relationship with my son's father. There was no time to grieve the loss of my relationship. I just jumped right into another one. I was pregnant really quickly, within 9 months, I believe, of being with this man. And he's from the East Coast and I'm from the West Coast, but I was best friends with his brother's wife at the time, and that's how we met. He moved out to Oregon. We got pregnant and realized we didn't have any money, so we had to move to the East Coast. I came out here. I was still doing the weekend warrior thing, and then I ended the relationship after 3 years and after being a mom to my son, because he wanted to control my drinking and I wanted to drink how I wanted to drink. I didn't want anyone controlling it. When I found out I was pregnant, the first indicator that I might have a problem with alcohol should have been the fact that I waited 24 hours to tell anyone I was pregnant so that I could drink one last time. And the entire time I was pregnant, I obsessed over a drink. I was like, God, I hope he comes early. God, I don't want to be pregnant. I hate being pregnant. I hate it so much. I didn't necessarily hate being pregnant. I hated not being able to drink while I was pregnant. My son's born. Within a week, I was already drinking on the weekends again. He was born not even a week old, and I had bottles in my room. So I'd get wasted on the weekends, but I didn't think I was an alcoholic because I was fine during the week. Fast forwarding a little bit, my son's 3 years old. I end the relationship with his father. I drive out to Oregon, back home, because I think that the geographical change from Massachusetts, which I was resentful at being in the first place, was going to be better because my home is Oregon. I grew up there. That is where I belong. I was convinced I belonged there. So I get to Oregon. I'm already engaging in another relationship with another man while still ending a relationship with my son's father. This is a childhood friend. I had been friends with him in high school. And I knew he was going to let me drink how I wanted to drink. I fell harder for this man than I have loved anyone on the planet. I have never loved him or anyone more than I love this person. I obsessed over this guy, and I became his girlfriend. I got what I wanted. We got together. I got to drink how I wanted. And instead of becoming a weekend warrior, I was drinking every day, 7 days a week. I'd go to work. I'd come home. I'd be cooking dinner for my son, give him a bath real quick. Couldn't wait to get him to bed. Couldn't wait for 7 p.m. because then I could get drunk. I could get drunk and nobody could control my drinking. When you have an alcoholic relationship, a lot of the times there are episodes in that relationship. People get triggered, people fight. So the police were being called all the time. I was so drunk. I'd been arrested numerous times and held in a drunk take, never charged. There was domestic violence on both ends, and that went on for 8 years. I was 29 years old when I couldn't stop drinking. It became to the point where I would wake up shaking and I couldn't even consume food until I've had a drink. By that time, I was like a fifth and a half a day of alcohol. And I wish I could say it stopped there, but it didn't. It got up to a half gallon a day of alcohol. My family and my friends were concerned. I ruined and destroyed relationships, burned bridges. I had cars repossessed. I lost my apartment. DCF got involved in my life. They never took custody of my son by the grace of God, but they were concerned, rightfully so. I got to the point where I was drinking a half gallon a day, and my family took my money, my cards, and so I'd have to shoulder tap, and I'd have to ask one person here for $1, one person there for $1. I became so obsessed with getting enough money to get a half gallon that day that that's all that mattered. The moment I woke up, that was my first thought. Okay, how am I going to get money? Because I have no income. I have no cards. I have no wallet. I have no nothing. And then I would plan out strategically the liquor stores that knew me so that they wouldn't card me because I had always looked on the younger side. They wouldn't card me because they knew me. So I'd go to those. And then I'd get my half gallon, I'd go home, and then I would just veg out on the couch. I wish I had a better story, but my story is pretty gruesome because I would wake up in my own vomit. I would black out. I would lose time. I got to the point where DCF had asked me to separate from my household because they didn't want me around my son, rightfully so. I was in no shape to take care of my child. So I was like, fuck it. I didn't care. Oh, excuse me. Sorry. I was like, I don't care. I don't care. I'm just going to go drink. I'm going to go drink how I want. And so I slept outside. Because I would be drunk. It didn't matter. I went missing multiple times. There are multiple missing persons reports that were filed against me in Oregon. And then I'd get a moment of clarity, thank God. Usually when I'd wake up in the hospital, and I'd been, separated from the alcohol enough to have some coherency, I would be like, okay, it's time to go home. So then I go back home. I'm sober. I go back home. It would last maybe 24 hours, and then I'd be back to doing the same thing again. So the last time it got pretty violent in Oregon. It got violent with my ex, and it got so violent. He too suffers from his own mental illness. He had threatened to harm my son. He threatened to drown my child in the bathtub that day. That was enough to make me realize, even intoxicated, I was completely wasted. I knew something had to change because I took him seriously. There's no way I'm going to let my child die or be drowned. So I called his grandparents in Massachusetts, which is my son's father's parents. And I asked for help. And I said, I think I need help. I think I need to go to rehab. I'd spun dry out of detoxes in Oregon a few times just to get DCF off my back, but I didn't actually care. I didn't want any sobriety. So my son and I boarded within 12 hours with no belongings, boarded a Delta airline flight out to Massachusetts during COVID. This was in March 30th of 2020. And we boarded a flight that only had 8 passengers. And they flew us to our family out here in Massachusetts. They had been supplying me with enough alcohol so that I didn't go into DTs at the time. They were very well aware of my story because it was a DV situation. So they were flying a DV victim and their child from coast to coast to escape and for me to get home. So to this day, I have a letter from Delta Airlines. And the reason I say that is because that's a huge part of my story. And so we can circle back to that in just a little bit here. But so I get to Massachusetts. I'm so sick. I look like death. I'm 300 pounds. I'm miserable. We're in Leominster where his parents live, his grandparents, and they had a bottle of Grey Goose. And they started an at-home detox where I would get like a shot an hour just to, and then they'd slowly progress it to less and less and less, just so I didn't get too sick. I ended up being in a 3-day withdrawal where I was shaking and sweating and so sick. I didn't eat. I was vomiting. I don't have to get into the gory details, but I detoxed from alcohol. And then I sustained a hard conversation where they thought that I needed to work a 12-step program, and they had a cousin who happened to work a 12-step program, and they reached out to him to help me. That is how I met my sponsor, who is still my sponsor today. And I got a taste of what the 12-step program was. And to be completely honest, I thought it was a cult. I hated it. I thought it was ridiculous. And I was like, there's no way these people are this happy. There's no way these people aren't closet drinkers. I couldn't believe that a program like that worked. And I wish I could say in March I was ready. In March of 2020, I was ready, but that's not where my story is. Kyler's grandparents, it's just my son, gave me, they had a 2-family home. So they gave me an apartment, a 3-bedroom apartment where I didn't have to pay anything. They gave me time to find a job. They helped me get furniture, all these things. Well, I had like 26 days sober. And I was like, okay, I have the job. I have the things. They don't need to know. I'm just going to start drinking in my closet, quite literally a walk-in closet, by the way. I was in the closet every night drinking. But then I realized that I couldn't just drink at night because it's not how it works for an alcoholic. And so I started drinking around the clock again, very, very quickly. Within like 3 days, I was drunk around the clock. They found me, and I was obviously passed out in a chair. And so they took my son away from me, and they had no choice but to, get DCF involved. And I've obviously, I feel blessed that they did do that. So then they're like, you know what, no more at-home detox. You need to go to rehab. And so they put me in a cab to Advair, in Worcester, which is a rehab, facility. And I said I'm not going unless I have a pint of alcohol. You get me a pint of alcohol and then I'll go. I got my pint of alcohol. I got in the cab. I was drinking my pint. I got to Adcare, and I said, because I smoked cigarettes at the time, I had said, hey, I'm going to smoke a cigarette. I ran away. I ran down the street, and there were employees chasing after me, screaming my name, asking me to come back. And I got lost because I'm not from Massachusetts. I didn't grow up in Massachusetts. I've never been in Worcester. Like, I had no idea where I was at. And I found myself a temporary home behind a dumpster on Belmont Street because there was a liquor store that would sell to me without an ID. And all I had to do was what I knew how to do, which was ask a few people for money. So I asked a few people for money, and I would just stay drunk. That happened for a few weeks. The pressure that put on my family, being a missing person, lost in Worcester, is unreal. Is unreal. My child, who was 8, about to turn 9 at the time, didn't know where his mom was. As much as my family tried to shield him, he was concerned. My child was concerned. I ended up getting assaulted while I was out there, and I was taken into UMass hospital. It was a CCU because they found me without clothes on behind a dumpster. And I woke up in the CCU in renal failure. And a nurse wrote me a note and told me, you're not alone. You can do this. You need help, basically. So I'm in CCU. They transferred me out of CCU when I started being a little more stable. And my child, the police notified my family. And so my son and his father came to see me, but I was unrecognizable. I was swollen. My face was really big because I was in renal failure. I had no hydration, no food, because the only thing I was seeking was alcohol at the time. And I saw my son's face. It was his birthday. It was July 14th. I saw his face and he was so heartbroken. That was my God moment. That was my second God moment. And I started making calls, and Spectrum had a bed for me in detox. So I AMA'd, which is leaving the hospital against medical advice. And I told the doctor, if I don't leave and I don't go to this detox bed in Spectrum, I'm going to die. Because that was my truth. I was going to die. And so I AMA'd, I got to Spectrum, and I gave my son's father a hug. I kissed my son goodbye, and I went to detox, and I was so miserable. I was sitting in a chair waiting for intake. And this beautiful man walked in. He was wearing black shiny shoes. He was wearing a suit. Mind you, this is July 14th of 2020. He's wearing a suit. He had an umbrella, and it's July, and I'm like, why does he have shiny shoes and an umbrella? And my head was hanging down. And to this day, Jesse's heard this before, but to this day, I call him my Jiminy Cricket because I don't know who this man was, but he stopped for whatever reason in front of my detox chair. And there were so many people. Every detox chair was full. There were so many people waiting for a bed. And he pointed at me and he said, "You're going places. God's got a plan for you." And I get chills saying that out loud because in that moment, I still had reservations. I said, okay, if I could just get DCF off my back, if I could just stop drinking for a little while, even until my son's 18, I can go back to drinking once he's 18 because it's not harming anyone once my son's grown. So I still had that voice in my head playing that, I'll go back eventually. And so then I get to detox. I do 7 days there. And for whatever reason, I heard that man's voice, my Jiminy Cricket, say that I was going to go somewhere and that God had a plan for me. So I decided to go to CSS at Spectrum. I'm like, what the heck? I'm like, oh God, I really need to get back to my son. That's the voice that was saying, I need to get back to my son. But that's not true because I wasn't there for my son. I was so intoxicated, I couldn't be a parent. So I went to CSS. I was miserable. I hated it. I hated every second of it, but I still went. Because the voice kept saying, there was two voices. One was telling me to leave and to forget about getting help. And the other voice was telling me, Britt, just a little longer. Hang on a little longer. And so I'm at CSS. I'm coming up with a plan with my counselor. And I'm like, okay, what can I do? All right, we're going to do women's residential at Spectrum. So I do the women's residential program. And man, oh man, was that challenging living with women in communal living. But I did that for an additional 4 months. So I had a few months away from my child where I would just get weekend visits. His father would bring him to see me every other weekend. I would talk to him on the phone. And it was traumatizing for my son and for me. It was hard, but it was what needed to happen. And eventually, working with my son's father and DCF, we came up with a plan that I would get placed in Orchard Street, which is a residential program for women and children, where I went there for a year. I stayed there for an entire year. And I learned so much in that program. And I'm so grateful for my time at Spectrum and my time at Orchard Street. So grateful that I didn't even want to leave to start my own life again, because I was fearful that, what if it doesn't stick? What if I relapse? That didn't happen, thank God. But while I was at Spectrum, I kept having what I call God moments, where I was building a relationship with a higher power that I didn't understand. My prayers kept getting answered. Even if they weren't answered in the way that I wanted them to be answered, I gained an understanding that my higher power wasn't a man with a stick in the sky. It was energy of my deceased loved ones and a little bit of every single religion that I had known anything about. I just made my own. And today I have this strong foundation with a higher power. I pray every single day. I get through very, very difficult times because of that. Once, just to backtrack a little bit, once I graduated from Orchard Street program and Spectrum, I was placed into a low-income housing situation because I had had a get-well job as a medical assistant at a dermatology practice. I stayed there for a year. I showed up to work. My supervisor, she made a comment. She was like, wow, you take a cab to work every single day and you take a cab home? She's like, you really want to be here. I really didn't want to be there. You know what I wanted to do? I wanted to prove that I was a good worker, that I could have a good reference. And it worked because I did that for an entire year. And then I was hired at the place that I currently work now. And I've been there for over 3 years. And I love it. I love that job so much. And I show up and I'm a valued employee. I de-escalate patients. I am furthering my education today. All the promises that the 12-step program that I finally agreed to work with my sponsor had come true. I'd gotten all the material things back, the car, the home. I got a relationship with my child that's unbreakable. I've built relationships with men and with women. My relationships with my family have healed. There are still relationships that are we have no contact because I did a lot of harm, and I have to accept that. One thing I will say is without the 12 steps of AA, I would be dead. I went on a cruise in 2024, and prior to that, I had applied for nursing school, and I decided to step away from the 12-step program that I was so used to working because I had 2.5 years at the time of sobriety. And I was like, oh, I have a strong foundation. I'm good. I don't need the program. But that's a voice. That's an alcoholic voice telling you you don't need to do what's good for you. You don't need to take your medicine. And so I had stopped working the program to focus on school. I had attained a job at a local hospital and my triage job that I currently work. And so I had 2 jobs and nursing school, and I was like, oh, I don't have time. I don't have time for AA, but I'm good. I'll still pray. I'll be fine. So I found myself in the middle of the ocean in 2024, August of 2024. And I had been single my entire sobriety, which is not part of my story previously because I had always had relationships that crossed each other. They crossed over because I didn't know how to be by myself and I didn't know how to love myself. And so I'm single, I'm in the middle of the ocean, everyone's drinking, everyone's coupled up, and I realize I'm incredibly lonely. I'm incredibly lonely, and a voice said, oh, just tell the bartender that you want a pina colada, but forget to say virgin. That scared me. That scared me. So I didn't do that. I went to the balcony, and I stayed there for several hours alone. My son, I was with friends as well, work colleagues. And so my son stayed out and did what he did, but I was alone and I was on the balcony and I had a moment where I had this immense amount of peace come over me and I knew what to do. So I got back to land in Boston and I had class started again. And so it gets dismissed early for whatever reason. My home group is Montechusett Young People in Leominster. We meet Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. And it was a Wednesday night. And for whatever reason, class was dismissed early. And I was like, okay. So when I got off the highway from class being dismissed early, I could take a left to go home or I could take a right to go to the meeting. I decided on that day to take a right, and I found myself back in AA. And I am telling you, I threw myself into that program because I saw how easy it is that a relapse could happen. Before, I never worked with women. I wasn't willing to sponsor women. I wasn't willing to complete my 12 steps. I had stalled out previously on my 4th step, which is a significantly difficult step, for 18 months because you have to look at yourself and look at all the stuff that you have, which is challenging for people. And a lot of people drop off at that step and they just stop, they give up. So I went back and I did it all again. I started over with another sponsor and I kept my sponsor. So I had 2 sponsors by this time. So I started the steps over and then I resumed the steps with one. I'm working with these women. I'm doing commitments all the time. That's how I met Jessie. I am going to all the meetings I can possibly go to, and I put AA at my forefront. And I finally, I gotta say, 2024 was a very difficult year. I had sustained so much loss. I had gone through a heartbreak. I had some financial difficulties that had came up. I had a diagnosis that I didn't particularly like. And I was heavy. I had lost weight and then gained weight, lost weight, gained weight, lost weight. And so I was like, you know what? I need to change. And so in September of 2024, I decided to start watching what I was eating and working out and really working on my steps again and working with other women, sponsoring other women. All these amazing things kept me from drinking, kept me from a relapse. And instead of just, keeping it at AA, I decided to go back even further. And I jumped into a program called ACA. ACA is an amazing program. I recommend it for anyone who's grown up in any type of dysfunctional family. It doesn't mean that your parents have to be alcoholics. It just means you grew up in dysfunction. I would recommend that you get your 12 steps down first so that you have a solid foundation, because it's an incredibly painful program to work because you're looking at your childhood. I realized when I had endured some heartbreak that I always put a man on a pedestal, and I don't know how to love myself, and I have I lack security. And so I had to find that within myself before I could give that to someone else. And I realized by working ACA, which I'm still a work in progress, that that is one of the most fundamental things that's happened in 2024 that's led me to who and where I am today. I am slowly becoming the best version of myself, and it wouldn't be without Spectrum. It wouldn't be without Orchestra. It wouldn't be without the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and it wouldn't be for all the love that surrounds me. I am so thankful and so grateful, and thank you for bringing me on your show. That's it.
Well, thanks, Jessie, for bringing Brittany to us again, right? Because we already know you at Spectrum, and I could let you talk all day long. That's so much powerful in your story, and so much clarity you have now, and so much vulnerability. So I just really appreciate your vulnerability and sharing your whole story. I think this is part of why we do this podcast, right? To share the whole person, and that through all of those stages, you were who you are now. And one of the things I'd like to just reflect on, right? I'm the clinician in the room. So, and so is Jessie, right? But often I take that role. And, there's so much that related to attachment style and things that were related to how you grew up as a child. And, I think the work that you're doing now to really heal those childhood wounds, right? I'd love to make sure that you are recognizing that was what your brain and your body were used to, right? Your nervous system was used to that kind of chaos. So when there was violence, when there was abuse, when there was all of this negativity, it's because that felt like home to you, and that's what we're really learning. And it takes a really long time to teach ourselves that we can be home somewhere different than we've been before. And you are putting in that really hard work, right? I'm just so impressed with your story. The other thing that really strikes me, and we talked a little bit, when we first met last week, that, in the medical field, but your story really strikes me. I always value and appreciate when individuals with lived experience enter the medical field because it's so desperately needed, right? So that others like you might encounter someone like you in an emergency department, in a doctor's office. But there's just so many places where somebody in the medical field was part of your story. So whether it was the nurse, whether it was your Jiminy Cricket at Spectrum, whether it was just the supportive staff at Delta, like that struck me quite a bit, right? That just a lot of opportunities there for those moments of support. So I don't know. I have so much more to comment on, but I'll let you go, Jesse.
Thank you, Brittany. Thank you to Lisa. I'm just blown away. I mean, I've heard your story a bunch, and I'm still sitting here like, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry. Because it's so powerful, right? You compared yourself to Cinderella growing up and not really having a childhood, and then having the childhood, for those period of years once you were in a home, and then it being ripped away again, and then kind of this roller coaster of emotions going through. And here you sit today, a product of all of that, but also, like Lisa said, the real you was there the whole time. It just was covered with, trauma and violence, and just, like I'm thinking of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. As soon as I learned that in school, something clicked for me in my own recovery, because I always wanted to do something in life, but I felt like I was always digging out of a hole because I could never even get that first basic necessities down, never mind self-actualization, right? And today we're looking at somebody who is actualizing who you were meant to be, who that person told you at Spectrum, God's got a plan for you. You're going places, right? And I love the fact that you talked about a higher power of your understanding, a blend of all the different religions and other experiences you've had, but also wove it, throughout your story, whether it was, I wrote down here, God moments at Spectrum. I've shared with you before, I can identify, right? God moments on a balcony in the middle of the ocean. How cool, right? God moments, with the Jiminy, and on and on and on. So, you just are an amazing example of what can happen once somebody is finally, for a multitude of reasons, ready to put in some work, and knowing that there's never a finish line, but we continue to grow. I was meeting with someone the other day that had a bracelet on that said, recovery is discovery. And I thought that was very powerful, because your story is a great example of the discovery process that you're currently in, have been in for the last 4 or 5 years, and currently in, and the fruits of that here. So I just wanted to thank you so much for your story and coming on here and sharing with us.
Thank you.
One of the other things that strikes me is the self-reflection that often I only see in individuals in long-term recovery, right? Because there is that bit of a requirement to take a look at some of that. And I often will say so much of the rest of those that are not in recovery maybe never look at any of these things, right? Maybe continue to behave in ways that harm themselves and others, and don't ever get to this place. And sometimes I just think that, there's this light that comes off of folks. Jesse's probably heard me say this a few times, but I can even see it on Zoom meetings. I see it every day in those that we support in our programs. But and I think that that's the gift of recovery, is the kind of requirement to do some self-reflection that some people will honestly never do. And the ripple effects of that and the changing of cycles in your family for your son and his family and his children in the future is really, really unbelievable.
Thank you.
So I heard a little bit about what you do now. I'd love to, before we end, I mean, it's so hard. I could just keep you talking all morning, but I know you have lots of other things to do, and I've already had a busy morning. But I'd love to just reflect a bit more on what you're doing now. I heard a lot about the structure of returning to 12-step, doing the ACA work. I also heard a lot of wellness that you've been doing and taking care of your body with nutrition and movement and things that really support your overall wellness and well-being. And would you mind just sharing a little bit more about kind of what do you do now to take care of yourself?
Yeah. So 2024 was a very hard year for me, but I stayed sober, thank God. But I realized like I want more. I want to be the person that I've always dreamt to be. And I had known a man in recovery previously, and when I returned, I reconnected with him. And I will always forever be grateful for this person because he mirrored something in me that showed me what I needed to fix. And because of that, I dove right in, and I'm becoming the best person, the best version of Brittany that I've ever been in my entire life. And I'm so grateful. But my New Year resolution this year was to walk through fear and do things that scare you. So a lifelong dream of mine has always been to fly. I love flying. So I am putting myself through aviation school in addition to working on my bachelor's degree in nursing. And from there, I don't know where it would go, but that's kind of why with the whole Delta thing, how amazing would it be for that to wrap around? So let's see. I don't know what God has in store for me, but we'll get there. I do love working in medicine. I love my patients. I know I belong there too. So we'll see how this is going to all pan out. I'm kind of just letting God and the universe take the wheel for once. And I'm just going to end up where I end up. Exercise is a huge part of my life. I was 300 pounds. Today I weigh 165. I still have a little more to go on my weight loss journey. I eat really nutrient dense food. I hit protein goals. I love hiking. I have a dog who's amazing. And my son and we go for walks, and I work out in the gym. I eat healthy. What else? I don't know.
Brittany, I just need to reflect real quick. Sorry to cut you off. I've heard of traveling nurses, Brittany, but come on, flying nurses? That's pretty stinking cool.
I mean, I don't know.
I did not know that about your story, and I thought I knew I thought I heard everything, but just like to reflect on that, you're a shining example of in recovery. Yeah, I say it a lot on here and in my like personal life, but like we can do whatever we want as long as we have a foundation in recovery. Like you can go to school and become a nurse, or you could go to school and become a pilot, or you could do both. Right?
I know I do have a lot of plates, but they all even out. They do. So when nursing school isn't so high in academic load, then I really focus on the flying, and when the flying, it balances out. It does. So the summer is really going to be dedicated to the flying.
That's so very cool. That's so very cool. That's something that I would be afraid of, and probably wouldn't decide to do. So it's super impressive. And I just love the symmetry in your story, right? There's so many places where things were on your path that maybe in the moment you didn't know what that meant. But later you find out, and it's really a beautiful story. You need to write a book at some point. Just going to add to your plate, but there's really some really wonderful symmetry in your story.
It does. I guess reflecting, I could see that. It just kind of all play a part. It's interesting.
Yeah, there's a book in there somewhere. I agree.
Let's not toot my Leo horn.
But just in closing, thank you so much, Brittany, for coming on here. I echo the sentiments of Lisa, just being raw and vulnerable and being able to present the whole person is such a testament to the work that you've done today and the work that you continue to do and why you're uniquely qualified to help others because you've been down this path and now you have a solution. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. Stay in touch with us at Spectrum. Stay in touch with us in lots of different ways. I think you have a lot to offer to those that listen to this podcast and beyond. We're seeing a lot more increases in admissions for alcohol, and we need to hear these recovery stories right now. So just so appreciate you. Highlight of my week and my month. So thanks so much, Brittany.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right. Take care.
Okay.
We're going to
Bye-bye.
sign off now. All right, folks, listen to Airing Addiction, subscribe, like, do all those things so you can hear more fantastic stories like Brittany's.
Thanks,
Take care,
everybody.
everybody.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye.